Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to another episode of the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. Have you ever watched an ad that made you laugh out loud and actually want to buy the product? That's the magic of today's guest, Joseph Wilkins, the founder of Funny Sales Videos. Joseph has mastered the art of blending humor with marketing to create viral, high-converting video campaigns that don't just entertain, but also drive real business results. In this episode, I'll dive into Joseph's entrepreneurial journey from his early career in traditional marketing to launching a company that helps brands connect with their audience through storytelling and comedy. We'll talk about the highs and lows of building a business in the ever-changing digital landscape, how resilience plays a key role in entrepreneurial success, and why humor is one of the most powerful tools in modern advertising. Whether you're an entrepreneur, marketer, or someone who just likes a good laugh, this episode is packed with insights on creativity, business growth, and standing out in a very crowded marketplace. So sit back, relax, and get ready for an engaging conversation with Joseph Wilkins. Joseph Wilkins, welcome to the program. I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. I've seen some of your videos, and I've seen videos like some of your videos, and I dig those videos. I think that traditionally advertising has been overly conservative and not wanting to offend anyone, so they really don't attract anyone. It's pizza with no taste, right? I appreciate the humor in the videos that you've done. I've been on your website and I've looked at your reels and very funny videos.
Thank you.
So what's your backstory? What have you done prior to starting this company, jumping in, as I like to say, jumping into the deep end of the cold pool? Before you did that, What was your background?
Oh, gosh. I started out, I went to university to learn graphic design. So I always had kind of an artistic background. My dad was a fashion photographer back in the day. I'm from London. I now live in the US, but he was very big in his sphere. He actually did the personal portraits for the Queen of England, did like Rolling Stones covers and worked for Vogue magazines. And so I kind of grew up with it in my blood. We had a big studio in our house. And so when I went to college, I hate school. I didn't want to do anything academic, but I wanted to get a degree. And so I went into graphic design. I thought that would be a good avenue for me. And my very first job out of college as a graphic designer, and I'm dating myself here, I just turned 50, but my very first job, they said, hey, the internet is starting to support video. We should try to figure out how to put videos on our website. And so they're like, hey, let's send the graphic designer on a course. And that literally was kind of my first foray into the world of video. And then I started, just as all entrepreneurs, probably most entrepreneurs listening started, I had one foot in a real job and one foot doing my own freelance thing, evenings and weekends, doing videos for people. And eventually my wife just said, pick a job. And so I jumped it.
She pushed you into the pool.
Yeah, exactly. She working full time during the day and then burning the candle evenings and weekends. I never saw her. And so, yeah, she did. She gave me a big shove. And about, 25 years ago is the last time I had a real job. And so I've been doing this ever since, but not in this, the Funny Sales Videos came about 7 years ago. So for the first 20-ish years, we actually did like infomercials, like long form, big 30-minute shows, back in the day when you used to actually flip through channels, we would get you.
So for broadcast television then?
Yeah. In fact, my very first infomercial was the Little Giant Ladder infomercial. Did over $200 million in sales. Talk about a lucky first client. And I kind of milked that, as all entrepreneurs should, find one thing you did good and promise people you can do it again. But, lightning never strikes twice. But anyway,
I don't know if that's a curse or a blessing to have your first time at bat a home run, because
yeah, that's a good question.
I mean that sets the bar, not just expectations for your clients, but for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. But for me, it definitely was a good, feather in my cap, because, for 15 years we did long form and short form commercials. We did, lots of videos for huge brands, Google, LinkedIn, Chevrolet, McDonald's, Goldman Sachs, all at one point hired us to shoot, again, nothing funny yet. In fact, it's humorous that for the first 15 odd or so years, if the phone would ring and a customer was like, hey, we saw this really funny video, or we watched the Super Bowl commercial and we want to do something like that, my answer was immediately, no, we don't do funny. Because after trying a couple times and failing miserably, I vowed that I would never do it again unless I had the right team. And we can talk about how, I found that, and how your listeners, if they wanted to try something like what we do, they should, because you don't want to look silly. And honestly, the majority of people that try to do something funny, if they're not, and I'll add, I don't consider myself to be a funny person as far as, talented in scripting comedy. And so until I went out and found those people, I told clients, we won't take that on, because I don't want to make your brand look silly, because you've got to do it right or not at all. That's my opinion.
All or nothing.
Yeah.
I enjoy comedy, and occasionally I'll go to a comedy club, and one of my favorite, for all the wrong reasons, experiences is to go to an open mic night where, people who've been told by their friends and family that they're funny, they should, go to an open mic night, go up and just totally bomb and
crash and burn. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing about any kind of art, really. And this is an art at the end of the day. It's beauty, or its comedy, is in the eye of the beholder. And we all have different expectations of what comedy is. There's, one of my favorite types of comedy is from your home country, British comedy. I find that to be a very dark, sarcastic, subtle humor, biting in many cases. But sometimes that's lost on Americans, because Americans' comedy or appreciation for comedy is a little bit more slapstick and almost like vaudeville. And so it's people who think they're funny because they've been told they're funny and can get people laughing at cocktail parties are not necessarily the people who should be producing funny sales videos. Well, one of the questions I was going to ask you, and you actually already answered it, which is great, was did you start off with comedy in mind, which I guess the answer is no, or did you pivot? And you certainly pivoted. What drove you, besides maybe a few customers asking you to do something funny, what drove you to pivot to a format that is largely ignored?
Yeah. And just to give your listeners a little perspective of, why they should maybe tune in or listen to this. Before I started my brand, funnysalesvideos.com, which is majority of what we do these days. We still have our old company that does boring videos every now and then when people throw enough money at us, but we love doing the funny stuff.
Do you brand that boringvideos.com or is that just everything else?
No, I do tell people that it is the boring side of the company, but no, it's Procreative is the name of the other business. But so for 17 years, I think it was, we did quote unquote boring videos. The most we ever got on one video as far as viewership was a company that was a network marketing company that already had, a huge follower count on their social medias. And we had a video that hit 100,000 views, which at the time we were like, wow, that's amazing. Our very first video that we produced after, and I'll explain to you how we pivoted, but after the pivot, our very first video, and again, it's funny, I'm realizing this for the first time. This was our little giant ladder of the funny sales videos. We haven't exceeded this since, but it now has 500 million views. 500 million views. Compare that to 100,000 views.
When you say billion, I just kind of want to go like, the Dr. Evil
Yes, exactly.
billion.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But that's the difference.
That's actually unfathomable. That's
Yeah. And tens of millions of dollars in sales. In fact, I was invited to fly back home to Oxford University to present at a conference there on video marketing because that case study was just so outrageous. And so, I got to qualify. These aren't viral organic views, right? A lot of people think that videos go viral these days. There's really only two reasons why they truly go viral. Number one is if there's a big celebrity that already has, the followership to share and like that video. And number two is just a flash in the pan lightning strike that you
yeah,
can't predict, you can't
right,
control. But our videos, like you said, if you go to our website, you'll see example after example after example in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of views, like consistently. But the reason why we're getting those is because we create videos that are profitable, not viral. And let me explain the difference. A profitable video is if Mike, I was to say to you, okay, I'm making a video for your company right now. How do you find your customers? Oh, well, I find them on Facebook or I find them on Google, and I'm paying $10 per lead, let's say. Well, if we can create a video that when we put it out there and you spend that same $10, instead of getting one lead, you get 5 leads. So that's the principle. It's paid advertising that performs better than any of that boring stuff that might be good, it might be professional, but it's not hitting with people. Because let's face it, when you and I go to Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, we're not there to be advertised to. We're there
right.
to kill the time.
Yeah,
Maybe, we're in a doctor's office and we've got 5 minutes to spare and we want to be entertained or we want to connect. Well, if you feed them a piece of content that looks like a Saturday Night Live sketch, they're way more likely to start watching that. And then we trick you. And once you realize it's an ad, it's too late. You've already watched the
right.
majority and you want to keep watching to see
Because
the end.
it's entertaining. Yeah, you don't automatically knee jerk to screen it out. You don't
Yes,
just, next, right? If it hooks you, it hooks you. So you have to hook your audience
exactly.
probably fairly early. I remember reading an article in some advertising magazine decades ago about billboards,
Yep.
that you see on the side of freeways. And I think the statistic was something, I can't remember exactly, but you have about 1.3 seconds
Yeah.
to send a message because you're traveling past at 70, 80 miles an hour and you have about 1.3 seconds. And I know in the more traditional advertising world, if it's a radio spot or a television spot, you've got, maybe slightly
Frames.
longer, but you've got just a few seconds to decide whether to hook the audience, or they, particularly on commercial on television, they flip the station, that powerful remote control,
Right.
which is the enemy of
Yes.
all people who are concerned about ratings. The other point, I think, is, do you want a video that goes viral? My understanding, or at least my perception of viral videos is, yeah, you might hit 20 million views or 100 million views, but it lasts a few days until the next viral video comes out. And then,
Yep.
then you can't find it again, particularly on platforms like TikTok. Once you see something, unless you bookmark it or something, you'll never see it again unless it's paid. So
Yeah. And how do you prepare for that? How do you have inventory for that? How do you
right.
sustain and repeat and build a business around that? We've had customers who, when they launched a campaign that we created, they weren't prepared for it. They sold out of their inventory, and now they've spent money on a campaign that they have no inventory for. So you've
Yeah.
got to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with an organic viral video because you never know when it's going to hit.
Right. It may not hit right away. It may have been out for a year and suddenly some influencer saw it and reposted it and boom, right? It catch you totally unprepared. It's got to be a little bit refreshing to be able to create content that is not going out on traditional broadcast television, in that, you have a 30-second or a 16-second or a 15-second spot, and you've got bookends on your production. I think when things go out on social media, maybe less TikTok, because TikTok does have some bookends on it for most of their posters. But when it goes on social media or on your client's website, I mean, as long as you can create entertaining content, you've got as much time as you need. When I was looking at your reels, they were all several minutes, many minutes long, and so you're not constrained by the traditional mediums that sell you an ad by the second.
You're constrained by one thing: attention.
True.
So your video has to and you the magic word is the hook, right? But a lot of people think, well, I only need one hook.
Oh no, one hook gives you a few seconds, right?
Right. You need a hook about every 10 to 15 seconds is what we say, right? So you can hook them, then give them some marketing copy, then hook them again, feed them some marketing copy. But we actually do, so what you saw on our website is the long version of our campaigns, right? So we actually create multiple versions. And it's a really interesting conversation, because 80% of the time, on average, based on the data that we're given by the agencies that actually run our ads, right? We're just the creative shop. We then hand off to the agencies that run those ads. And from the feedback that we're getting, 80% of the time, the long version outperforms the short version. But we do test short versions versus long versions, because like you said, some platforms, they won't let you run anything over 60 seconds is about the norm. But a lot of our clients, funnily enough, are actually starting to go back to television. And so we do a cut that is a 30, so that they can run. It's, traditionally the broadcast platforms I haven't had much call for lately. It's more the Hulu and the YouTube and the apps that are connected to your TV. It's there that it's running, but we do longer versions and shorter versions. But as David Ogilvy used to say, the more you tell, the more you'll sell. And then I'll add in, but you have to keep their attention to keep them around so you can tell.
It's not as easy as just talking into a camera. You got to have retention, right, all the way through the ad. The first time I experienced a comedic ad, I mean, like crazy comedic ad, was Squatty Potty. I don't think that was yours, but
nope, it wasn't. But I'll tell you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that quite candidly with a combination of laughter and horror all in one, because I can't remember where I don't know if I saw it online or on like late night television or something. I think it was on television, and I couldn't believe that the networks were letting that air, because it was quite graphic and in a beautiful multicolor way. I mean, rainbows pooping,
it was
into ice cream
graphic.
cones. It was very creatively graphic, but it was it broke through the ceiling. It busted down traditional rules of advertising, and it was irreverent and funny in a strange way. And I remember realizing this at the time I was watching it. Like, we have come to a new era in socially acceptable advertising, and I don't mean that as a diss at all. I'm not sliding that at all. I was just like, okay, new era now, and that ad ran for a long time. It had a life to it, and then Squatty Potty came along. Poopery came along with that woman that looked like she was right out of Mad Men, the 50s, and in this pink dress, sitting on a toilet, trying to explain to the audience how, she won't smell up the bathroom because she's taking precautions with this thing. And I just can't imagine the old days of standards and practices at network television that they would ever let something like that go, because they're like ultra conservative, because they're broadcasting all over the country, including the Bible Belt, including liberal areas, and they're just like, water it down. That probably I imagine those types of ads, maybe those ads specifically, kind of open the door to your genre of
Yeah,
advertising.
absolutely. So you asked the question earlier, what made us pivot away from boring ads to these funny ads? And you actually are bringing up the exact case study.
Have I
What we
asked and
saw,
answered the question?
yeah. So both of those ads that you just referred to, Squatty Potty and Poopery, were produced by the Harmon brothers, who are about 15 minutes down the road here. So I'm in Utah. And it's kind of funny. There's like a cluster of 4 or 5 companies here in Utah that do the same kinds of videos. But Harmon Brothers were kind of the pioneers, the ones that went first. Their very first one, I believe, was Aura Brush, the tongue scraper one, and then they went on to do Squatty Potty, Purple Mattress, Fiber Fix, Poopery, Chat Books. So we kind of were observing these. And that was when we finally said, okay, we got to figure out how to do this, because people aren't watching TV the way that they used to. And they certainly aren't watching social media the way that they would watch TV. So we've got to do something different that cuts through the clutter. And we actually enrolled in the Harmon Brothers mentorship program. So I personally went through the Harmon Brothers training. I was actually interviewed by them on their podcast because of our first campaign that did 500 million views. They obviously wanted to use my case study to sell more memberships to their coaching program. But those guys, fantastic, and I think they really do a good job of pushing it as close to the edge as possible without going over. And especially in today's, maybe last month, should we say, cancel culture society, I think things are shifting, things are changing.
Yeah, for sure.
I am of the opinion that you shouldn't offend the audience, not from any other reason that it's bad business, right?
Sure.
And so if you can skate close to the line without being offensive, you can be funny, you can be cheeky, but I personally think it's harder. Like, some of my favorite comedians are those that don't go into the gutter, like
Right.
Brian Regan,
Yeah.
Nate Bargatze, Jim Gaffigan. I think it's harder to make good, funny, clean comedy. I think that's harder.
Yeah.
That's an art. And so in my world, I try to adopt that same kind of philosophy of, how do we make something that's really shocking, that's really surprising, but still doesn't really offend. Now, there's a difference between offending and, kind of getting people bent out of shape so that they start not fighting, but
Shocking's different than offending, right?
but you want engagement, right? You
Yeah.
want people to comment that they're surprised or that they don't like this. In fact, one of the biggest things from our first campaign is, I'll just tell you this as an example. So our very first campaign was for a company, True Earth laundry detergent, and they make these eco-conscious sheet. They look like dryer sheets, but they're actually liquid detergent that's
Right.
hydrated.
Right. I saw the video. They don't where they show how much water is in a traditional laundry container. It's like 80% water. And then it shows
You're remembering
10,000 empty
plastic
bottles falling from the sky and all the waste and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm glad you remembered all of that information. That proves my point that if you get someone to engage with a story, they retain it longer. But anyway, the point of that campaign was to appeal to not necessarily the tree huggers, but, regular people who don't want to destroy the planet, right?
Yeah.
We didn't want to lean in too far and say, you've got to be an extremist to buy this product.
Right.
So we wanted to make it very relatable. But in that video, there's just one shot where she has like a laundry room with some products on the shelf that are plastic bottles of other things. And we got so many comments saying, this is hypocritical. She's going blah, 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 blah. And I thought it was fantastic because it increased all of the
You started a
engagement.
conversation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Advertiser's dream.
Yep.
Spark debate, spark conversation, spark comments. You couldn't, back in the old, broadcast days, there were no comments. I mean, you could write a letter to the station, but only the station saw it. So it didn't help your cause. Now on social media or, any other digital platform, people can talk about it and link to it. And you can't link to an on-air commercial. It's on air, it's done. What was the biggest challenge that you faced in getting your business off the ground, and how did you overcome those challenges? Limit it to about 800 or 900 challenges.
Well, I mean, I would say the challenge that's most relevant to what we're talking about today was I wasn't funny, or at least I wasn't funny enough. I wasn't clever enough to write these scripts. And the most important thing about these kinds of videos is, number one, the scripting, number two, the actor that you pick to deliver the scripting. And so the challenge was, well, how do I find really great writers without paying, through the nose for them, to the point where our videos would have to be like some of the bigger agencies charge like $1 million for these videos. And we're like, we want to be the hot, the big agencies for people that can't afford big agencies. We want to trick people into watching our videos and thinking that cost $1 million, right? When in reality, it was priced low enough that even a single entrepreneur that's got a decent business could afford. And so what I did is I basically went out and said, okay, who needs money that's funny? and the answer is stand-up comedians. Like, if you think about it, most stand-up comedians, they don't have a real job. They travel during the day, they gig at night at the clubs, and then they travel during the next day to their next club. And so I saw a way, if I could reach out to them and just say, hey, we have script writers, right? Because we got to make sure, number one, that the copy points to describe our product and the solution and, overcome the objections, all of the basic copywriting skills that I learned in infomercials still apply. But then I have to layer on top of that the humor. So literally this morning, I was punching up a document with 3 comedians that last night got on my document and just added jokes in. So what I did is I would watch comedy, and then I literally would email them or their agent, if they had one, and I would ask them if they'd be interested for, literally an hour's work. Like, take my script, read through it, and immediately what comes to mind. And stand-up comedians, if you think about how much they get heckled, how much they respond, and they're very, very sharp. I mean, that is a crucial.
They are funny. Yes, exactly. Yeah, they're fast on their feet.
So I knew that they could react very quickly, and that all I'm looking for is their initial reaction of anything that they would add to this script. But one person's not enough. So I knew I needed to have like at least 5 comedians on every script. And that's basically how I did it. I reached out to a bunch of comedians. I weeded through dozens and dozens until I found the ones that I was like, I can consistently count on these guys to deliver good, solid work. And that's how I overcame that objection of, I'm not funny. I don't know how to do comedy, but I do know how to do marketing. I do know how to be persuasive. I do know how to create great looking video content. And then that was the missing link.
Well, I think, you say you're not funny, but clearly you know what funny is when you see it, when you hear it. I mean, and that's got to be a skill. Well, I don't know if it's a skill. I don't know if you can learn that, but certainly you have that within you.
Well, it's also about testing, because funny is only funny to the specific audience I'm trying to reach. So if there's like a teenage product, and in the other case, there's like a SaaS for a CXO, those are 2 totally different audiences. What's funny to one is not funny to the other. So you also have to test it on the target avatar to make sure that you're hitting that specific person. So it's kind of a juggling act of making sure it's persuasive, it's funny, but it's relevant.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship, and I'm speaking from experience, and I'm sure every entrepreneur will agree with this, can be lonely at times, right?
Yeah.
You're in the crow's nest trying to drive a ship, and frequently there's not that many people around you. How do you handle moments of doubt or adversity, and how have you handled that in your journey?
Wow, that's a big question. I think personally, I'm probably more confident than the average person, but yes, certainly it is very lonely. And, I do miss the camaraderie of, having I worked for maybe 6 years in corporate America before I started this company. And there are definitely pluses and minuses. What's vacation time? What's sick leave? What's,
Yeah.
fill in the blank, what's
Yeah.
benefit, and all of those things that come with a nice, position at a big firm. How do I get through? Honestly, I tell people I have the best job in the world. I mean, I create funny stuff, and I think that really gets me through. But certainly there are definitely times when things are tough, and you got to make the bills work, and you got to find the next client, and it's a roller coaster, right? It's feast or famine. I think it's a combination of, I couldn't imagine going back, even
Right.
though there are good things about going back. Like, I literally had a conversation 2 days ago with a friend of mine that somebody offered to buy his business, and is like, I don't know if I want to sell, because then I'd be working for the guy that buys the business. Like, the thought of working for the man, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah,
So
I
it's a
think.
combination of fear and just, I love being autonomous, and I love what I do.
Yeah, I've said this on many times in the show, and so have my guests, that entrepreneurs make the worst employees. You can never
Yes.
go back. It's a one-way valve,
Yeah.
right? You can never go back. The problem is we don't do politics, except maybe when we're relating with, potential clients. But we write our own rules. We draw outside the lines, and we need to. I mean, 80% of all businesses fail. I talk about that statistic, terrible statistic from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics,
Yeah.
that 80% of all businesses statistically fail. And I
And what
think
is it
that,
within the first year? It's even crazier. It's
well, yeah,
nuts.
first year it's like 30%. By year 5, it's 50%. By year 10, it's 70. And by year 15, it's 80. You have better, if you're playing blackjack in Las Vegas, the odds of winning a hand of blackjack are about 47%. You're probably going to lose, but you'll win a few, but you'll
Right.
lose more than you win. But you can get lucky. I think the mindset that entrepreneurs bring, unbeknownst to them at the time, is that they just believe, well, that doesn't apply to me, and it's that mindset that makes us
Yeah.
terrible employees, because we just don't hear the stat and go, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's only 20% chance I'm gonna make it. We believe that there's an 80. We reverse it for us because we're special, right? At least in our
Right.
heads.
And I think there's an element, we were talking before we went on air about faking it till you make it.
Yeah,
Like that has to drive you through the early years and even the later years. Like, just
yeah,
having that dogged determination and that belief that, yes, some of it sucks, but this is what I need to be doing.
yeah. I use the term "fake it till you make it" with a friend of mine who's not an entrepreneur, and he kind of snapped back and said, "Well, isn't that lying to your customers?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm faking to me. I am telling myself I can do this. I'm telling myself I know more than I actually do. I tell myself
Right.
it's not going to be as hard as it's actually going to be. I'm the victim of my own fake it to make it. And
Right.
yeah, customers hear that too, but they're not hearing a lie. I believe that, and
Right. Right.
I just and if the facts don't support it, I ignore the facts and just keep acting as if I know everything. And then eventually, reality catches up, and you either fail or you become what what you claim you are. Eventually.
Yeah. And it drives you to have to improve. That's, to me, the best part about faking till you make it.
Yeah, you can
It's
only
not
fake
that
so
you're
long.
lying.
Right, right.
It's just saying, I can do it. You're not
Yeah,
saying, I know how to do it, but you
right.
know that you can get there.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of times I'll run into a problem and I'll talk to my team or I'll talk to my wife about it, and she goes, "What are you going to do?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, but I'll figure it out." I always do,
Yes.
MacGyver my way out of it or whatever. Your world in your business is somewhat unique in that you need to have a creative mindset. And I create content, I design equipment. My day job is in the electronic manufacturing, equipment manufacturing space. So, I design all the machines and write all the code and do all that nerdy stuff. But that takes a certain amount of creativity. And, now that I create content for this and another space, that takes a certain amount of creativity. And I find that creativity requires a very specific mindset. How do you avoid external factors like stress or worry or other negative emotions that might interfere with your level of creativity? It might mess up your mindset.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that, because I think like my job as a director, like when we're on set, just imagine this. You have 1, maybe 2 days of on-set time for something that has taken you 2 months to pre-produce, right? So you've brainstormed ideas, you've scripted things, you've auditioned actors, you've bought props, you've bought wardrobe, you've got the cast and the crew, you've got the location. Like on any given set, there's thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes for bigger shoots, of dollars being spent in one day. Like per hour, the time is ticking away. You add everything up. So if you're on set and something goes wrong, what do you do? Like that's my job. There's been nightmare experiences where people haven't showed up, or props were broken on set, or something as simple as it's an outside shoot. The weather said it was good, but it started snowing. Like, just imagine those settings that are totally out of your control. That will drive you insane if you let it. And I think the biggest thing is you can't take things too seriously, especially
in your business. Yes.
Right. You can't take things too seriously, but sometimes the problems lead to the solutions, and even better. So the fabled story about Steven Spielberg shooting Jaws off the island of Nantucket, and the shark broke, right? It was the worst contraption. It just didn't work. Well, what did Spielberg do? He thought on his feet, and he actually filmed a film that was way more scary because it showed less of the shark.
Yes.
And so you can't let stress factors and things that are out of your control dictate your day, or dictate your month, or dictate your year, whatever it is. You just have to look for the serendipity in the problems, because every problem, I was actually listening to a conference this weekend. I think it was Chick-fil-A management training that was talking about how it was the Ritz-Carlton. I was at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando this past weekend doing a film shoot. And the manager of the Ritz-Carlton said that at the Ritz-Carlton, they don't call things problems. Like if a customer calls up and says, there are ants in my bed, or if the customer says the alarm's going off, they don't call those problems. They call them opportunities. Because every opportunity that comes up can turn into something better than not having the problem. Sure. I know that was a little rambling and a little philosophical, but I think have to have a mindset.
It's the other side of the same coin, right? I mean, we can choose to laugh or cry. We can choose to view it as a challenge. We can view it as a defeat. I mean, it's really a mindset thing. You talk about Jaws. I think the scariest, freakiest bit of film on Jaws was, didn't even show the shark at all. It was that woman swimming in the water, and you heard the, dun, dun,
Williams.
Dun, and then all of a sudden she gets pulled under, and then comes up, the water turns red, she gets pulled under again. Gasping, there was no shark in that image at all. And I think that single bit of footage took millions of people out of the ocean for several years, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the thing we think about when we're in the water. Even in fresh water, I think about that scene. It's like, what's under my feet? Which was a brilliant bit of cinematography and directing there. And I don't know if the shark was supposed to be seen then, or if that was a moment it wasn't broken, that it was broken, but it seemed to work. What's been the most difficult setback that you've had since founding Funny Sales Videos?
Well,
and how did you navigate through it? The most important part.
Well, I would say there's been a couple times 2008, 2020, those 2 times, right? So obviously what we do isn't cheap. It's very affordable, but it's certainly not cheap.
Right.
And so, budgets go with the economy. And so when we had financial downturns, we had to pivot, we had to think, we had to rethink. And so I think just, again, trying to figure out how do we get around this. So I'll give you an example. In 2020, COVID, when everyone was just shut down and there weren't any, like we literally couldn't go out and film. We couldn't gather. And so what we ended up doing is we pivoted. I don't know if we broke any rules or not, but there was like a bunch of events that we were supposed to go to and film. And we ended up turning our studio here, something we'd never done before. We have a pretty big studio. And we had like $30,000, I remember, of bookings cancel within 24 hours of some announcement that Trump made that, shut down restaurants and public gatherings. And we were just like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so we ended up calling our clients, because a couple of these were big conventions where we were going to film the event. Again, this was our boring side, right? We were going to film this event that had like 5,000 people at a big convention center. And I remember calling the client and being like, okay, the event's canceled. We can't do it. What if you guys did the event from our studio? And we live casted it over Zoom, which at the time, people just weren't doing. We'd never done it before. We'd never done a live broadcast. And we ended up turning our studio, literally building the stage that they would have shipped to the convention center. We built the stage here on our studio. And then I got that idea to approach other companies to do the same thing. And there was about 6 months where we did like event after event after event. We'd never done one before. And honestly, I don't think we've done one since. But for that 6 months, we made a pretty penny doing something that was something we'd never done before. So that was probably the best example I can give you of a real down that turned out to be a real up.
The irony in all that is, although it was difficult to get clients to contract you to build, to make commercials, particularly in the early part of the pandemic, because people feared the economy was going to go south, and in many aspects it did. On the other hand, you had an audience that had nothing better to do than to watch TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and all the other YouTube. Right. So it would have been, in hindsight, a tremendous missed opportunity if they scaled back their advertising. And then what a lot of entertainment brands and business products manufacturers realized is they went through the roof. We were selling, our country, every country was selling more printers and networking hubs and network extenders and Game Boys and things like that, because A, people got stimulus money, B, they were stuck in their homes, so they started improving their homes. I think furniture, appliance manufacturers, suddenly got a spike in sales, which they were not prepared for. They had actually prepared for the opposite, so they were caught off guard. But that would have been a perfect time to really ramp up your advertising, because you've got a captured audience. You have no competition in terms of distraction except to watch videos and things like that. But next time it happens, if the government does something as crazy as shutting down the economy again, or ordering people to stay inside, we all know, right? That's a great time. I write a lot of content, and every once in a while, it doesn't happen too often, if my mind's not in the right place, I just get this writer's block. And any author or writer of any kind has experienced this, or creator of any kind has experienced kind of the writer's block, where it's not necessarily due to stress. It's just the ideas are in there and they're just not coming out. How do you handle burnout or writer's block in an industry that is demanding fresh content on a cadence?
Yeah. So the easiest way I can answer that question is by saying volume. So quantity over quality. So when we get tasked with a new client, hey, we want to come up with some concepts. We've seen your work. We love what you do, but we don't see anything that's exactly what we sell. So give us some ideas of, brainstorm some ideas and impress us so that we can justify hiring you guys. So the first thing that we always do, take judgment off the table, right? So internally, our internal team, we want to throw out 50 bad ideas. That's our goal. The worse, the better. Like literally just come up with bad idea after bad idea after bad idea. And then the beauty is in standing back and looking at all of the content and trying to pick out a couple of diamonds in the rough. That's really, to me, that's what it is. And most, whether you're writing a novel, whether you're writing a commercial, whether you're writing a user's manual, whatever, it's just take the pressure of quality off the table for a while and just write, just come up with ideas and don't filter them. Like just throw them out and you will be amazed if you just do that. And let's be honest, 7 years ago, we didn't have chat GPT. There's
Right.
no reason why anyone should have writer's block anymore. The only thing that you do have a problem with is sifting through that content to get to the good. So I would just say, don't be hard on yourself. Don't judge yourself. Just start and stuff will emerge.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's almost like you're writing a bunch of pitches and then you're pitching them to yourselves.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, you are both sides of that equation there. And
then consume. That's the other thing. Like yesterday for me, what was it? Yesterday or the day before, whenever that football thing happened. That's my that's my time of the year, Monday morning, because I could care less about your football. I like the rest of the world.
Real football.
Where you use your foot
Liverpool and Manchester and all that. Yeah.
Anyway, I could care less about the halftime show, about the game, the score. I want to see the commercials, because I'm constantly writing down ideas that I am stealing from other people, right? Because there really are no fresh ideas. Everyone's just regurgitated what other people have done. It's just about putting your spin on it, making it unique.
Yeah.
So, go watch what the best people in your class are doing, or read what the best people are doing, and make sure you're constantly consuming, because you can only really write what you know.
As good as those commercials are, as much as I'm the same way. I'm not a big football fan, and I do enjoy the commercials. I'll usually wait until after the Super Bowl, and then some YouTube channel will show all the commercials.
Right. That's what I
Super Bowl. And the interesting thing is, as entertaining as most of them are, I don't think any of them will ever be able to claim they had 500 million views like yours did. Nowhere near that. Some of those commercials are designed to be aired once for millions of dollars, before you even pay for the production cost. And if they are aired at any other time, they're not going to be anywhere near as effective, because there's an expectation when you watch the Super Bowl that these are going to be great commercials. Most people, or many people watching the Super Bowl, you've got a bowl full of Doritos and pitchers of beer. So they're talk about mindset. They're in a mindset to be entertained, and the threshold is lower. Back at the few Super Bowls I've watched, I remember watching an ad and we're all cracking up. It was the best ad ever. And then I saw it later and I'm just like, what was I thinking? Well, I don't know what I was thinking, but I know what I was drinking.
Right.
What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are struggling to get traction with their business?
Wow. Being an entrepreneur, again, you and I sound like we're cut from the same cloth. I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. And if you can, maybe it's not for you. Like you gotta be obsessed. Like you gotta eat, drink, sleep. I remember, and I'm not this way anymore. I kind of wish I was. I've been doing this for 25 years, and so there are places where the fire maybe isn't burning as strong as it used to. But I remember there were days when I would just want to go to the books. This was before YouTube and, all these online learning places. I would just want to go to the bookstore, plant myself in Barnes and Noble and put my head in books and learn and try to figure out things that I knew I didn't know. And, you've got to have something that's more than just, hey, I want to be rich, or I want to not work for someone else, or I want to take vacations wherever I want. It has to be more than that. It has to be, this is like something I just have to do. And I'm sure there are people that are successful that don't have that. But my first question to somebody who's just like, I'm about to jack everything in and I'm going to mortgage my house and, whatever, I would say, is it something that you can't imagine not doing?
Mm. Yeah, I love that comment, that if you can think of something else, maybe you shouldn't go forward, because there's going to be times when that something else is just going to be your parachute, right? And you almost have to burn the boat. You have to have a burn the boat mentality, where you're now on this new land. You burned all the boats. You can't go back, right? And
but I would also say, what's the smartest way to do it? Now, I was kind of lucky. There's some industries, maybe yours is one of them, where like you need angel investors and you need equipment and you need, all of this, you need millions of dollars to start your business. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, can you find ways? Is your industry is there a way you can do it without taking on debt? Like, if at all possible, do that. Like, shoestring it, bootstrap it, go eat rice and beans, as Dave Ramsey would say, one of my heroes. I love his mentality on stay out of debt, get out of debt, stay out of debt. Personally, when I was like 25, my wife bought his course and we did the envelope thing where you just carry cash and you don't use credit cards. That changed my life. And I translate that into my business.
That's unusual. That's awesome. And it's unusual.
And not all businesses can do that, and not all business should do that. There's certain businesses that have to have investment, but I can't tell you how many times I would have failed if I had debt. There were months where I'm just like, okay, how do I do this? Okay, I can do this. If I had that load of rocks on my back where I had to pay someone else, I wouldn't be here 25 years later.
Yeah. I think in your specific industry, and to a much, much, much smaller degree, what I do with my content is, 20 years ago, the barrier to entry was super high because the cameras, the editing tools, the lighting was very expensive. I mean, it was like Hollywood or nothing. There was no yes, exactly. There was no prosumer version of that. Now,
$50,000 this would have cost, and you're not even close to the quality when I started.
Right. Exactly. So between the quality of the lenses in an iPhone or a Samsung phone and the processing that goes on inside, which was unheard of back then, you had to do it all optically in the old days.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry is very low. And I've talked to some younger people in my technical industry that wanted to start content creation. And my advice is always, just start doing it. Well, what gear do you recommend? How much money do you have? Well, nothing. You already own it. What's in your back pocket? Pull it out, start filming. Just start creating. And
I would add, learn how to use it. Then
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But the acquisition is already there, right?
Yes.
And is it the best? Absolutely not. Do people today expect it to be the best? Some do, but many don't. And in their world, their friends, the people they could influence are not cared about. In fact, there's almost, I would imagine there are a lot of Hollywood type studios that spend a lot of money to make it look like it was shot on an iPhone, and they're using a $20,000 camera, but they're applying filters to it to make it look like it was more amateur than it really was.
The barrier to entry is up here now.
100%. Yeah. Do you ever receive pushback from clients who may feel more comfortable with a more traditional marketing style? Now, I know you offer both, But
Yeah.
have you ever thought like
So
they need the comedy, but they're like, oh, I don't know
yeah,
about that.
yeah. So the short answer to that is yes, I obviously do. And those clients I don't end up working with because it has to be a pretty, I'm going to trust you relationship or we won't work with them.
Hmm.
They have to look at what we've done in the past. And more importantly, they have to see the results that we've got in the past to justify hiring us. But once they hire us, we always have an open door policy, unlimited script revisions, unlimited edit revisions. The only thing we can't redo is the shoot without charging again.
Right.
But it's amazing. I hardly ever run into issues because they know what it is that they're getting because they've seen what I've done for other people. The only time that we've really run into problems is when we've tried to go too big. Like the bigger the corporation, the more levels of management, and that can get really tough if you're getting your boss's approval.
Yeah.
And I remember, I won't name the brand, but you'd know who they are. And we spent, like $30,000 creating this campaign. And it's one of my favorite campaigns to date, and it's never seen the light of day. Because the boss's boss saw it at the end, wasn't involved at the beginning, didn't get the vision, didn't understand it. When he saw it, I don't know if it was egos that he didn't have his thumbprints on it, but it just got canned.
The not made here type
Yeah.
philosophy. On kind of that same vein, for viewers of your content that either love it or hate it, I'm sure you get both.
Yeah.
Is there a
And that's
definable?
intentional.
Yes, exactly. It sparks the conversation.
Yeah.
Is there a definable generation or generational gap or geographic zone that influences those responses? Do you find, for example, younger people dig it, older people hate it, or certain parts of the country it
For
plays
sure.
or doesn't?
Some parts of the country, I don't think we've run into that. Definitely international. I remember talking at Oxford University. We had a panel after I gave my keynote, and there was a bunch of people on the panel that do different things, and we were just talking about how a banger of an ad in one country is a flop in another. You can't, and especially with humor. I don't think it imports and exports. You have to write to the culture. The state by state, no. Aged, absolutely. Again, back to what I said earlier. You create an ad for a tween, it's gonna, people like, I don't know if you have kids. I have teenagers.
My daughter's 41. I used to have a teenager. Now she's 41.
Okay. So I have teenagers, and they're constantly making fun of my wife and I because we understand every other word that's coming out of their mouth. Right. So you got to speak their language, especially when it comes to humor and trends and all of that. You got to speak their language. And so again, creating the video for the audience, we haven't talked about this, but the most important part of the entire video is defining your customer avatar. Nobody would ever write a long letter and then walk to the mailbox and then decide, who should I address this to? Who should I put on the envelope? But that's what we do in business. We make these videos because we like them, and we know we are the best, and we know we have a great founder story or whatever it is, and we post it not giving a second thought to not just demographics, not just how old are they, where do they live, how much money do they earn, nothing. I'm talking psychographics. I'm talking what's their favorite drink at Starbucks? What music stations do they listen to? What's their, what TV shows, what podcasts they listen to? When you can drill down and really define what's the name of this person, what's their address, what's their zip code, like the more you know about them, the more you can speak to them, and the more you can model, in most cases, the character of the video, the hero of the video, which should be your customer. It should not be you. You're not the hero. The customer is the hero because they made the choice to buy your product. Yeah. So many people get that wrong.
Yeah, in my company, we switched to a different model of advertising. We were the braggadocious, talk about us, talk about us, talk about us. We're great, they suck, that type of stuff. And, we sell a very technical product that solves a very technical problem within the electronics industry. And I'm guilty of coining phrases which turned out other people have coined before me. So although I came up with this phrase on my own or read it and forgot about it, I call it conscious marketing. And there are whole websites dedicated to this concept that I'm about to describe. And it's exactly what you said. Relate to your customer on the customer's level, meaning the best way to sell our products is to stop talking about our products. And our products solve a particular problem that customers know they have, but they don't understand the root cause of the problem and what the best practice remedies are, which happens to involve products that we make. So, but if we just start talking about our products, they're not connecting. They don't have a causation to their problem. So I might as well be talking about rocks on the moon. It's like, oh, that's interesting, but what does that have to do with me? So I find that like, for example, on the soap commercial that you guys did, the kind of dehydrated soap, just mixed with your own water rather than buying all this water.
Right.
I don't recall, maybe it was there, but it didn't stick. I don't recall them talking about how bright your whites will be and how it'll protect dark colors and it smells lovely. All they hit pain points. They hit things that consumers identify with, like, yeah, these things are heavy. It's like lifting weights. You can't put them in a shopping bag because it'll break the bag. They take room on the shelf. Ecological consequences. Yeah. I don't think y'all spend a whole lot of time talking about the quality of the detergent. Right. That's implied. So
everyone else can say that. You got to pick your battles, and You've only got so much time. So don't say anything that other people can say.
Yeah, we're about out of time. So looking ahead, 2 more questions. Looking ahead, where do you see funny sales videos in the next, I want to say 5 to 10 years, but in your industry, 10 years is probably 1,000 years. So maybe in the next few years, where do you see sales video? Where do you want to see it going?
Well, and I may not be the stereotypical, American dream entrepreneur that wants to build his company so big he can sell it and, retire to Maui and ride into the sunset. I just love what I do. And so my goal is I want better. I want to be better. I want to improve. I want to, I want to continue to beat the results of my last campaigns. And obviously to get a video that has more than 500 million views, right? And I'm working with a couple of brands right now that I can't mention, but they're big brands. And I was like, I couldn't dream of working with this brand, a few years ago. So I want to continue, slaying dragons, but most importantly, having fun. Like I'm at the stage where I think less about how much money will this make me and more how fun will this be and how will I send a ripple through the social media platforms with this campaign. So just bigger, better, not necessarily bigger, better.
Yeah. Yes. I think entrepreneurs put too much emphasis on growth. They think that, I did. I used to think, I have a bunch of problems at this stage of the business. I just need to grow.
and which will bring more problems.
Totally. I think the problems rise faster than the growth. And rapid growth is the luxury most small businesses can't afford because there's a difference between growth and scaling. Growth for growth's sake is a recipe for bankruptcy. Scaling involves quite an investment, because in order to grow, you need to scale. In order to scale, you need to invest beyond the growth, right? Like your customers that, the early example that you gave when a video goes viral and they're not prepared. That's a lack of scale for the growth they wanted, and it's expensive. I feel the same way. To me, it's quality over quantity. And there was a time in my business journey where I actually scaled back the company. I fired some products, and because they were just also rans. They were good, but they were not great. They were just good. And the enemy of great is good. And so we decided we're only going to do things that we can legitimately claim are great and best in class. And if that makes us smaller, hey, that's okay. It's easier to run a smaller company than a big company. Right. And last question, how did you define success before you started your business, and how do you define it today?
Yeah, so success before my business, again, probably more stereotypical, huge company, tons of employees, tons and tons of money. How do I define it now? I define it now that I have a good, balanced life. Like, the most important thing to me is my family. And that's why I started this company. I probably didn't consciously say that every day. But that's the most important thing to me. So you could, give me some billion-dollar offer. I look at people like Elon Musk that are just geniuses, and I have tons of respect for, would hate to be him. Absolutely, his schedule, everything. I just see success as being, I'm doing a good service to my clients. I'm providing jobs to the people that work or freelance for me. I love what I do, and I still get to live the life that is more important to me, which is not my work life.
Well, I'm very happy to say that you're 15 out of 15. So you're episode number 15. So the 14 entrepreneurs that I've talked to before you all had different answers on how they defined success before and how they define it today. I've never had anyone say, before I started my business, it was all about money and cars, and now it's about more money and more cars. They've all had a philosophical change and a little higher octave description of how they define success. So good thing for keeping the trend going. For my audience who would like to get more information on Funny Sales Video, if you're watching this on YouTube, look down here, click Show More, and you'll see a link to funnysalesvideo.com. And for my listening audience, it's safe to do so when you reach your destination or get off the treadmill or whatever Lord knows you're doing at this very moment. Look at the show notes on your podcast app, and that information will be there. Joseph Wilkins, funnysalesvideos.com. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I was really looking forward to talking to you, and you did not disappoint. I appreciate all the insight and all the kind of geek stuff that we got into probably before we went on air about the technical side of your business. I really appreciate all your sage advice.
It's been lots of fun, Mike. I appreciate you giving me some time on your platform.
My pleasure. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. A special thanks to Joseph Wilkins for being my guest on this episode. The Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast is available on all major podcast sites and on the Reluctant Entrepreneur YouTube channel. We've been busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, which I'm excited to share with you. So don't miss out. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes twice a month on the first and third Tuesday. If you're an entrepreneur or you know an entrepreneur who would like to be a guest on my show, please let me know. Visit mikekonrad.com/podcast and apply to be a guest. Just remember, that's Konrad spelled with a K. If you'd like to reach out to me, my email address is mike@mikekonrad.com. Once again, Konrad with a K. And one shameless plug, if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available as a paperback and a Kindle version, both available on Amazon, and as an audiobook available on both Amazon and Audible. Thanks again for listening or watching. Until I see you again, be unstoppable.